Hi everyone, I'm Nick Burrows. I'm the Proposition Development Director of Alternative Networks, which, when I'm asked, usually means I'm coming up with stuff like this. The reasons that technology should resonate in organisations such as yourselves and others, and the things that we've all grown up knowing and loving from vendors around the stuff it's going to do for us. When we buy technology, it's going to deliver oodles of value, and it's going to make everything better. And to be fair, I believe in this, and you can ridicule me if you wish, but what tends to happen, of course, is that up front, when we look at this kind of messaging and we say, yeah, we're going to reduce communications latency, we're going to save everyone hours of the day and all this kind of stuff, we forget that in the real world, when we're delivering projects, a lot of that initial impetus and reason to do stuff, not by anyone's fault, not through anyone's fault, ends up being a bit different. And the greatest manifestation of that, specifically with projects where you're putting technology in the hands of users, is when it's handed to projects. Good project managers work to budget and time and to a level of quality or deliverable output, which is great. But the return on investment is often not looked at that point, because the project team have got what they're driving for. And we've all been involved in projects where we reach that amazing date where we've deployed everything, 3,000 plus users have got what we think they need. And we go to the pub to celebrate because, frankly, it's been a bit like pulling teeth to get there, which is great. But I think often, and what I wanted to talk about today, off the back of a number of things we've seen recently, is that we lose sight sometimes of the fact that the true ROI of technology investment is user adoption and use. It's very easy to put handsets on desks or deploy UC clients on mobile phones, but if people aren't using it, are we really actually getting the benefit out of that technological investment? And the project team often, again, not through their own lack of capability, lose sight of this, because, as I say, they've been handed a budget in which they've got to do a bunch of activities. I was interested this morning, actually. I think it was Ulster were talking about. Oh, sorry, it was Loughborough were talking about what they'd done down at the Olympic Park, and someone in the audience, I think it was Ulster, actually asked if how many people had started using the video technology, and they said, I don't know, I don't have the measurement tools in place, which is quite common. But interestingly, even if you do, what is your definition of an ROI on that? You know, what percentage of user uptake constitutes a win, if you like? Just out of interest, those of you that have done UC projects, specifically, I guess we start with VoIP and then get into the exciting stuff, but how many of you have started, just as a show of hands, with a percentage of user adoption in mind as your point of success? Thank you. So, some, not all, which is interesting. I'll be very interested in chatting to you later about this, because we've done our own internal projects, and we do a lot of projects with organisations such as yourselves, where we're often not asked to, or we don't push ourselves enough into, helping you define that and then realise it thereafter. And what I wanted to talk about today was a couple of situations. One which is us, which is we've recently rolled out Salesforce towards our sales team, and it's great because it's Salesforce. Everyone knows Salesforce. How difficult can it be? But the way it's actually been implemented means that our time to value off the back of that investment is already significantly elongated, whilst the project team have done exactly what they wanted to do and got everyone's user accounts activated by this day, and there was some training. So from their mindset, it's done. So that got me interested. And the other thing is, we regularly do activities where, like I've just asked, you know, we ask people what's the success, and they say, well, you know, it's got to be done by this date, which is the common one. Oops, I'm sorry, throwing things around. But the bottom line is, for technologies to actually improve productivity and all the wonderful stuff that people like me dream up and believe in, they've got to be accepted and used by users. So I did what most people in my position do and jumped on Google and started looking for other methodologies that can help us ideally optimize the amount of user uptake. By the way, one of you put your hand up. What was your percentage of uptake or accepted use that you were aiming for?
100% for kind of phone use.
Yeah.
And 20% for UC without too much.
Great. Thank you. Which is interesting. And 100% really is 100%. Your 100% ROI. Well, yeah, I'd always argue that if you shoot for the sun and land on the moon, at least you're on the moon. That's pretty cool. But if you look at the various theories out there, and that's what I've focusing in on today, and trying to map them into what you can do to actually head things off at the pass and optimize that and hopefully quicken it. If you look at diffusion theory of innovation, you generally find that the first 16% or so of people is where the easy pickings lie. And someone, I think it was Ulster this morning, talked about finding advocates of the technology and using it, which is great. But what you really want to do, that's quite a small percentage, of course, is drive to your 30% or your 100% adoption, and which means you've got to push into the early majority, the late majority, and ideally, if you can really stomach it and you've got that much energy to do it, and you can do it in a 5-year investment period, you're laggards. There's also a chasm, or a perceived chasm, around you get to a certain point where there's not enough of it deployed yet, and there's not enough social proof or evidence to the early majority, late majority, and so on, that it's going to do anything for them. Which is interesting, because that in itself drives what is Maloney's 16% rule. I don't know if you've heard of it. I hadn't before this morning. I thought it was a character from Police Academy, if I'm honest. But once you reach 16% adoption, you need to shift the way that you get users interested. And that 16% adoption actually becomes your reference, your case study, if you will. And as I work through this, and I'll talk about some of the stuff that's out there that I think we can all of us work better to bind on and improve adoption. You actually you need to do a lot of that, and you need to do a lot of marketing. So the link back to me, if you like, is as I work through this, I saw an awful lot of the things that we do surreptitiously in marketing to convince people that the stuff we have in the kit bag is the stuff they need. And what you're looking at doing with the 16% rule is you want to get across that chasm to a tipping point where it becomes much easier to deploy out. So, simples then, anything we can do to improve the rate of user adoption, i.e. the number of people doing it, and lessen the time, gives us a better return on investment, a quicker return on investment. And in that, if you look at the same model, what's interesting, if you look at the work that's been done to research the disruptive technologies, the world's largest fruit company, for example, and what they've seen, they've achieved that through a number of means, but mainly having the right time, the right place for the right audience. But it's, as I say, it's simples, yeah? It's simple maths. So how do you do it then? And this got me further into Google and deeper into Google. And I did that awful thing about 20 minutes ago where I ran through my slide deck and realised half an hour is going to be a bit of a challenge. So if I'm talking fast, I apologise. Hopefully, if nothing else, a delayed digestion. There's a number of tried and tested theories out there around how people gravitate towards two things, actually. One is their intention to use the technology that they know is coming down the track, and the other is the actual use of such. Most of them are built around psychology, so there's 8 or so of the key ones that I've pulled out there, ranging from the 60s, the innovation of diffusion theory, which I've just shown you a slide on, which holds and has been tested, all the way up to more recent stuff like the technology acceptance model, etc. And between them, through tests scientifically, they've been found to account for up to 53% of variance in why someone would or wouldn't choose to use your technology that you're deploying, and conversely actually use it, which is great. But the problem with 8 different models is, you've got to disseminate them all. There's 32 core constructs across all of them, the things that you've actually got to drill into and figure out whether you can cause an effect, a positive effect. They're mainly based on simple, non-mandatory adoption of technology. So Nokia did a lot of work with this in the late 80s, early 90s about their telephones, for example. And a lot of the tests have been done after the event, so people have gazed back when they've been asked with either rose or brown coloured glasses, and they've commented on whether they felt on technology was something they would want to adopt, and whether it is at all. Luckily, a bunch of people at the University of Arkansas, really, but they sat down in the early 2002, and they created a unified theory. And I don't know if anyone's heard of this, just a show of hands. I hadn't, and what interested me about it was there's a lot of work gone into this, and yet we don't seem to have a methodology to make it happen, so I'm kind of trying to tie it together. But they created a unified theory of acceptance and use of technology, which instead of having 8 plus 32 constructs, or 8 methods and 32 constructs, they boiled it down to 4, like all good master chefs, a bit of a reduction. They looked at performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, and the facilitating conditions. Now, the first 3 feed into the intent to use your technology. So as you're telling people it's coming, those are the things that will shape their view on whether or not they're going to go with the flow. Yeah? And even in mandatory environments, of course, it's not a de facto standard, hence 30% rather than 100% aspiration adoption of UC. Facilitating additions are the things that people need around them to actually get on the user bandwagon and trust that everything in place is what they need in place to actually succeed with it, ranging from training to support, what happens when I can't make it work, that kind of stuff. These four are skewed heavily by gender, age, experience, and voluntariness of use, easy for you to say. Not all of them at once, but there are subtle things that play into those. So as you're building if you like, the heading off at the pass mitigation things that you might do to try and optimize your intention to use and your eventual use, these are the things you need to consider, the four things on the left there, and the skews on those based on gender, age, etc. There's also been some recent studies around cultural acceptance in the Middle East, which are interesting, but a little bit beyond my half hour and certainly my capability to talk about today. And what they found was that they could outperform traditional models in one model by getting a good 70%, 69-70% view on what the issues were in adoption. They believe it's a useful tool for managers to figure out how successful they're going to be, but most importantly, in the context of today, they help understand what interventions you can do to steer that towards the desired number or adoption rate or path. And of course, it's all based on perception, user perception, which again, I think we're very good at losing sight of sometimes because we get wrapped. I was talking to one of our project managers the other day, and she actually really enjoys that she can go into a meeting and talk the same talk that the engineers do. Unfortunately, when she then goes and talks to the users, it doesn't manifest so well or resonate so well. So let's have a quick look at them, and it will be quick. Performance expectancy is where an individual believes that technology is going to lead them. Is it going to do something for me? It is gender and age specific and interesting, and this is research, not me being misogynistic. Men tend to be higher driven by this, and younger people do. So if you're looking at young men, they're going to be theoretically very driven by it. It's the strongest single predictor of intent to use the technology. So if you can prove to people, or that group of people, that what you're delivering is going to help them perform better, then straight away you're going to have a very positive impact on their intention to adopt and thereafter their actual adoption rate. Interestingly, research goes further to say if that perception of self-improvement, if you like, is delivered to them via their management team or the people that they see as responsible for getting them more money, a better job, and all the rest of it, it resonates even better. Effort expectancy is to do with how much personal investment in time and effort am I going to have to put into this, which of course we all do to some degree, but we're all technical, right? So we know we'll master it. Users don't so much. And again, the research, not Nick, finds that women and older workers tend to put more effort into this. So as you look at the way they conducted the studies, which largely prove that 70% I was talking about a minute ago, they actually found that the demographic, if you like, of women and older workers lean much heavier on how much effort they think they're going to have to put into it in association to their desire or their intention to adopt than, for example, younger workers and men who are busy thinking about how much better their life's going to be and how much more money they're going to make, presumably. Social influence is an interesting one, and again, I've mentioned the tie into marketing, but a lot of this ties into that. This is the kind of stuff we do a lot. We figure out our social groupings, our target audience. We create something called buyer personas, where we look at the characteristics of the person we're most likely to sell to, and we try and spin stuff in their language. I'll come on to that later because it all plays in. But social influence, it's a much shorter time frame in the sense of it only has an effect on what people think they're going to do or their perception of what they want to do, but it's quite significant. And all four of the control things around gender, age, voluntariness and experience play a large part in it. And again, it's been found through study to be more salient towards women, and the need for affiliation increases with age as well. So again, you're starting to get a bit of a feel, and I appreciate some of you are wincing at the thought of getting that granular, but you're starting to get a feel of, if I'm going to convince this group of people over here that my technology and the thing I'm going to put in their hands in a few months' time is of value and is something they should be looking at, then straight away you've got a bit of a kind of a bit more of a target and a bit less of a kind of a broad shotgun approach. And finally, facilitating conditions. And this is where it gets to how it's supported every day. And the biggest single thing is how people, when they reach out for support or help, how it manifests. Again, age and experience. Experience being the one that people will maybe think, yeah, this isn't going to go well, because, when they did that last thing, I called up, I know I'd broken it, but, they didn't fix it very quickly, etc. That plays badly. And the existing perception, as we'll come on to later, is something that you need to understand and look at prior to making this stuff really work. And I appreciate some of you thinking, yeah, I know, I've still got a project to do, but again, I'd go back to the point that if technology is really going to deliver value, then you need people using it, and you need a percentage people using it, preferably more than what you're aiming for. Significance of each of these varies with time, and I would argue that pre-training is where a lot of this stuff starts. And again, if I relate to marketing, the marketing cycle, we're very happy to open that up and try and kind of cultivate that over a period of time. And in many instances, that works very well for a technology project too. Although when we've taken this to some of our customers and kind of benchmarked it, A, it's resonated, but B, it's resonated in the sense of, yeah, we kind of knew that instinctively, and we just did it because it made sense. But from a research perspective, post-training, 1 month after, 3 months after, and then beyond that, performance expectancy, is it going to make my life better? That lasts a lot longer after the initial training of here is the system, here's how it works. You've got to be careful with that, of course, because you don't want to get feature bombing. The amount of effort you've got to put in, is at its height post-training, because people leave the training thinking, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? I don't have access to it now, and what if I forget, and all the rest of it. But as deployment happens, they start getting a lot more comfortable with it, and it tails off. Social influence is the big one up front. So because once people start using it, they don't really care anymore. But prior to that, what do my peers think I should be using this, and how do they think I should be using it? And facilitating conditions is the thing that endures. You could argue that a lot of this stuff goes on beyond, because if you look at other studies around the fall-off of skills and the use of systems specifically, you can end up with up to 76% of the people that were using it and abusing it in the way you want them to, actually either being removed from the environment completely through job change or whatever, or just forgetting stuff over time. So you've got to be careful with that. So I've touched on this already, but what you're essentially looking at then, and I'm not for a second suggesting you should get berets and roll neck jumpers and start reading about marketing, but what you're actually looking is your operational delivery, training, which was mentioned a couple of times this morning, which is very important still, but you're actually looking at marketing the solution, what you're deploying as well. You've got to get that kind of marketing thing on. Or better still, lean on your marketing department, because I'm aware in the context of all this that you're also thinking, do you know what, I haven't got time to do all that stuff. And if, by the way, if you're thinking that now, wait till you see the next slides. But marketing principles and marketing people are very good at this. That's what they're employed to do. So it's worth, if you're not already looking at it, in harnessing their grey matter. So what can you do then? And again, I'm going to whistle through this because I'm conscious of time. From a performance expectancy standpoint, it's all about showing people the right stuff, not too much of it, and trying to put it in the context of their job. One of the customers we spoke to about this, they deliberately hosted a bunch of open days prior to the launch of the project. They got all the technology in one place, but then what they did is they skewed that against the groups of users very cleverly, and they said, you know what, that group of users, they're most likely going to be my early adopters. So let's get them in there, show them the whole thing, and yeah, iPads and all the rest of it. Whereas that sort of users over there, they're going to be our biggest potential issue. They're not laggards, but they're going to be the late adopters because they're caution, and if there's a reason not to do it, then frankly they're not going to do it. And let's show them a lot less, but let's show them in the context of their job roles. Finding advocates, and again that was mentioned this morning, is critical, because if you don't have your advocates, you're not going to get your initial 16% done properly, and those advocates thereafter, they become your marketing vehicle. Just like when we launch a new technology to market, the first thing we're looking at doing, or as soon as we can after a project's delivered, is get a case study. Yeah? In fact, you've probably had those calls from people like me all day long, right? Can we do a case study yet? Well, it's not deployed, but, but you want an internal case study, because that's going to shape the views and the opinions of the people that haven't yet adopted. From an effort perspective, it's all about making it simple and improving it simple. And again, the level of simplicity is based on the demographic that you're trying to get interested. Complexity and complex language is generally to be avoided. And again, looking at the demographics, one of the customers we spoke to, they're very happy with the way they developed their training plan, in the sense that they based it on their SKUs of types of user, and one SKU or one user group, they didn't have the cool button, they had a pick the girl in pigtails button, all this kind of stuff. They'd made it very human based on knowing that audience, which trainers tend to do, but it's very difficult if you say, right, we've got a training syllabus and everyone's got to go through it, so when are you available? You're available, all right, in you go together. And you've got a guy over here or a girl over here who's really up for adopting it and wants the whole kit and caboodle on day one. You've got someone over here who's terrified of the prospect of not having their aging analogue phone, because how are they going to do the basic things they need to do? And those people need more time and effort. And interestingly, if you look at adoption cycles, that's when you can also look at breaking it up. So one of our customers, the same guys that have done the pigtail thing, they actually broke it up into stages. So they said, okay, that group of users, we're going to start near field. We're going to deliberately keep it, do what you do today, just the same as you always did, or near as damn it the same. And then what we'll do, the second wave of that, is X, Y, Z. And whilst I appreciate that part of my standing up here today is all about reducing time to use and therefore improving your time to value, with those people it's much better to do a 9-month program of 3 cycles rather than try and squeeze it in 6 months and then have it not work as effectively. Facilitating conditions, and again, I've touched on this earlier, who are your net promoters? In the same way, I don't know if you run internal CSATs on your internal customers. It's something we do to our customers, and it's very useful, again, talking marketing speak, because it tells me who likes us, who doesn't like us so much, and it gives me an idea of who's my most likely, what we call net promoters, the people who would be most likely to sing our praises or do a case study, and conversely, who have I got to go and spend a bit of time with and show them that actually I'm not the enemy, I'm here to help them, it's just not worked for whatever reason. The former, of course, I use very much to create my marketing off the back of that 16%, but in facilitating conditions, if you don't understand the existing perception of the IT services, it can be quite tricky when you're actually rolling out a new bit of IT, because why are people not accepting this? Why do people not trust it? Why are they worried about the level of support and help they're going to get? Well, it's because, they're and again, perception's reality. I'm not for a second saying you're not doing jobs, but if their perception is, rightly or wrongly, that things don't work, then that's going to play on quite significantly. So, and another customer we spoke to had quite significant problems with this because they'd had issues that were beyond their control, but of course users doesn't care about this wasn't working or that the overhead on that protocol was too much, therefore the WAN didn't work. They just care about it not working. And they deliberately postponed the rollout of a UC solution where they were very keen to get as many of their internal customers using UC as possible, so they could straighten that out and change the perception and then bring the new stuff in with a bit more of a prevailing wind in their favour. So takeaways then, I might have actually done it. From my perspective, and this is based on not so much me sat in a room thinking stuff and more us taking this kind of framework based on the unified theory of use and adoption of technology. But 4 key areas: shape the expectancy for the right people. Not just one expectancy. A good example of that is letting people know what you're trying to achieve, as well as helping them realise what they can achieve. A lot of the time, again, that gets obfuscated, and it's just, is it new stuff because the old stuff's rubbish, or is it new stuff for new stuff's sake? Do we have to spend the budget so we've got new stuff? Sometimes bringing users into that, specifically your early adopters, can really help. Because if they understand that, they feel like they're part of the solution. Also, don't forget Maloney's 16% rule, and know when to switch. Have that in mind. So a few of you earlier had a view of what success looked like long term. Look at the short-term success as well, because once you've got that referenceability, you need to turn things around and start using that. The other thing on expectancy is, slipped my mind, is around making sure that when people know what they're going to do, keep it close and near field to them. So make sure, a good example is a customer of ours who they deliberately decided to give everyone the same handset, which was interesting because the open day I talked about earlier, they actually had people come in and say, handsets, where we're going, we don't need handsets, we just need clients, and it's going to be amazing, save money, do this. And they insisted and they pushed it through, and they said, no, we need handsets, and we've chosen a handset that is very similar to the one they've already got. by design, because for the cost we're going to get the optimum uptake of that, and then that gives us a platform to reach into the unexplored regions of UC later on. It's the same across the entire organisation as well, from the dean to the facilities guy. Everyone had the same handset, so none of the people who feared adoption when they walked around their university actually had anything to worry about, because the thing they'd learnt was the thing that manifested everywhere, and they didn't ever come face to face with something that did all the same stuff but had a weird touchscreen interface, etc., etc. Find your inner marketeer. Net promoters, very critical. We've talked about those, although those we talked about this morning. But finding the right people and then using them right can also take a burden off you guys, because if you look at any social construct, people trust the people nearest to them. IT aren't always the right person to come in and say, if you use this, your life will be better. Because, really? Do you understand my life, etc., etc.? Whereas if their peers are using it, and you've got case studies around that, that can help. Uniformity, simplicity, very strong, as I just said. Make everything the same. Plan the jumps that people are going to take, and know when to do it. Small hops with one group of people, giant leaps for mankind the other. Make it sustainable. Make sure the 76% skills erosion doesn't occur. In fact, one customer I spoke to about this, I said, "Oh, how long was your UC project?" And he said, 5 years. Basically, it goes on until we renew it. It has to, because all that time, if I get 100% users, oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? That's going to drop off anyway. So I need to sustain that and keep it going. The other thing I thought was interesting, and it's not actually covered in the unified theory of user acceptance, but it is covered in diffusion theory, is beware of the alternatives. So shadow IT can be good, can be bad. I've spoken to a number of customers on this particular thing. Some of them actually are embracing it and saying, you know what, if they want to do it, then I'm going to facilitate that. And some people really don't like the idea of it based on the overhead to them. And I see both arguments. But either way, if you let users grow at their own pace, and you give them flexibility and choice in how they do that, and support, of course, then ideally, if you want to head it off, you can head it off. And it could be that you remove the need altogether. So even though people want it, over time they actually realise they don't. If they do want it, it's up to you, of course. It's your organisation, your network, your comms. But the horrible thing about shadow IT is that people tend to do it anyway. So building flexibility in there is good. We find this a lot with mobile deployments, in the sense that bring your own device came from Gartner or wherever it came from, and everyone decided they wanted to do it. But what most people actually wanted and needed was choose your own device. So actually giving people a menu from which they could choose was much more effective. So lots of stuff, and I appreciate that theory and reality don't always add up. We benched this against a lot of our customers and our own internal projects, some of which have gone very well, which generally seem to employ some of these practices, some of them less so, which you can imagine don't. I'd be very interested in your feedback on it, because it's one of the things I believe we're not doing enough as an industry, and certainly from the vendors and suppliers who come up with all that great stuff, the reason 30% savings in time and stuff. I would argue we are not doing enough to help you realise that, and I'd be very keen on your thoughts thereafter. So we've got time for Q&A. Amazingly, usually I go on a lot longer, but failing that, if you're around later, I'd be really interested in a chat for your views on it, because I'm interested in finding out more about how we can help each other actually realise the value in IT, because it is something I believe in. I think we're all in IT for one reason or another. A lot of us didn't decide that when we were kids. We all went to university to do something else, of course. But now we're here. There is a real opportunity to make it stick. And that's me. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Lee. We've got time for possibly one or maybe two quick questions for the next session. Anybody's got one?
Some silence.
Women? No, I'm not being sexist.
No. I'd like, for the record, neither am I. Is what they found in the studies.
I absolutely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have always said that our UC project will fail on the manager secretary working.
Okay.
If that isn't done right, they will just throw the phone in my face and go, you can take that. And also the roadshow, we actually, it wasn't mentioned, but we actually took the technology, put it in a big room that comes see. So we had Microsoft, we had Jabra, and it was great for people who did not understand what UC was, they came to see it, and oh, when can I have it? So I'll agree. Just agree with that.
Thank you. Excellent. The interesting, actually, the other thing I didn't mention, but one of the on the managing expectations thing. So the roadshow was great, and it also helped weed out the that looks like a net promoter to me. Let's have a bit of a word. But the other thing that one of our customers did, which I thought was very clever, in marketing we're used to bombing the message. Right? It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. And then 6 months in, it's like still got the old stuff. They actually deliberately they didn't, after the initial communications it was happening, where they also talked about why it was happening and what we hope it'll mean for you. They left it until a week and a half before it was going to affect the individuals, and then there was a very targeted email went out just to those people. And they elected to, rather than do it over a weekend and you turn up on Monday and go, yeah, they actually did it at their desk. So they said, we're coming next week, and they'd rock up, handset in hand, and say, are you ready? Is now a good time? I'll come back in 15 minutes. They did it. They got them to log in, and it worked a treat. So it's, yeah, it's excellent, great stuff. Yes, and it's proven. I think what I found as I was looking into this was people are doing it instinctively. We're all picking little nuggets up as we go. But what was interesting is when you actually look at some of the research that's done in, the science boffins who sit in darkened rooms and come up with this stuff, the theories to test, it all holds very well. And that you can actually, I'm not sure I've done it service, to be fair, as I whistled through it, but I think there's a construct that you can actually start to build, which, although we do it, and I'm glad we thought of that. I think ideally, what we're going forward, there be some kind of construct we can all start looking at and say, if we don't forget any of this, we're in great shape. But thank you, Eddie. Really interesting.
Okay, thanks, Nick.